My son and daughter-in-law were there, my brother and sister were there, sister-in-law were there, I'm riding and I said, oh my God, I just told her whole family that. She said, yeah, I'm so. My son and daughter-in-law were there.
Okay, we're live streaming.
Because we get great water now, sure.
Okay.
Well, no, it's being recorded.
Spring.
How's that foot?
It's getting better. It's not back to normal, but yeah, it's still quite painful a lot of the time.
Who knows when that part goes in?
I know. That's why everyone that's broken something is still painful.
Okay, there's 2 pages. If you don't straighten the stack, you can find. Yes.
Do you have enough for everybody?
I think that's enough.
Telling the pages very much.
Okay, and you can go on, so 2 by 2, don't mix any of them.
And
Good job, guys.
its consequences last month and later. We now have election of officers
Very good.
for conservation. I need to do that first. So you're still chair.
I'm chair, and as such, I'll make a motion that we sign or that you
Call the meeting to order.
you become
Oh,
chair.
first you call the meeting for.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'll call it.
He's not.
Not yet. Conservation Commission to order. And the first order of business would be to elect officers. I'm putting forward as a motion, I was going to step down as chairman and. Okay, step down as chairman and nominate you for chairman, so
I second.
we have a second. All those in favor of that situation? No. We now come to vice chairman. Would anybody like to be vice chairman?
I would like to make the motion to nominate you, Henry, to. be
Okay,
vice chair.
all right. I will accept that nomination.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor of myself being, yes, okay.
All right.
And I would like to nominate our dear friend,
That was one wild.
You didn't pay enough tax. That's what it was.
Linda, to be our secretary.
Second, no one wants to second. No one wants to do that. All those in favor, I have a motion and a second, all those in favor, aye.
Linda's not in favor.
No, I'm good. That's fine.
So have you turned it over to her yet?
Yes, no, so she's now the chairperson.
Did.
I would like to say.
Can I take just a second to call the select board to order
Please.
at on the hour, and we are being recorded. And if you don't mind, I'll go through our portion and then we'll give it all back to you. Is that okay?
Well, how much is your portion? Does it include?
Pledge of allegiance, adjustments to agenda,
Sure.
public comment, which we are obligated to do. So if you could join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks. So any adjustments to the agenda? I'm proud, you know, that's the first time in 15 years I have no adjustment.
Serious?
Short.
And we don't have any public other than the members of your committee. If any of you have any comments you'd like to make? Okay,
I do.
Okay.
Does it have to be a comment around the select board meeting or can I just make a comment?
well, what I'm trying to do is get the select board meeting turned over to your meeting,
I'll
so,
wait for my comment.
okay. So now, so the next thing on our agenda is to discuss with you the land purchases. So having said that, I will then turn our portion of the meeting over to you, and next thing we'll be doing is adjourn unless we have to make a motion.
Right. So. All I need to do is ask if adjustments to the agenda, everything else can wait.
I do have a quick little adjustment. I just like to, little, reply, if we got any, any correspondence, this is our quick, one to pay it.
So we added to.
Yes, because I want to have one little covenant.
Yeah.
Oh, it's gonna be your boilerplate.
It's
Right,
reply I
right.
will make, so if we get correspondence.
Okay, so we will add it to the agenda.
Well, yeah, and I just want to pass it around, like.
Well, when it comes up on the agenda, we should pass it around, but
Because otherwise everyone will forget what.
Okay.
Right. So we add. Leslie.
Very short.
And at some point, I would like to give everyone a brief update on where we stand with the legal purchases in terms of Attorney Strong.
All right, so where we are in our agenda is discussion of the purchases. So do you want to start with a quick update?
I can,
Yeah,
the purchase sale agreement with the client has been signed. It included the language that you had suggested, would allow for potential reach back for the lane in the future. And Attorney Strong is researching the title. He did inform us at our last select board meeting that there is not enough survey information that he will be able to warrant exactly where the boundaries are and the exact acreage. But that's okay, in his opinion. I talked also with the surveyor that did a preliminary survey for Jeff Smith, who at length, who indicated that even though the survey was never completed, he felt that it was pretty close to completed and he saw no big discrepancies. He, as he put it, I saw nothing to say, wow, that's not even close. So, so the select board voted to move ahead with the purchase and sale agreement with that caveat. So that's where that's at, and I think Jim would like us to close or vote to accept it and close Tuesday on the client, I'm talking about client. Okay, we have the same situation with the Smith property. But again, I talked to the surveyor who says the same thing, and it matches up with the Prothero survey, it matches up with the town survey. The tax maps don't match the surveys, interestingly enough, in terms of where the Bork property is located. It's just, it's sort of inside, according to the surveys, the Bork property is sort of inside Prothero's property as opposed to the Smith property. So same, it's roughly the same acreage, but so the select board voted to proceed with that, understanding that caveat, and we had Jim is waiting on me to get back to him because there was a little confusion about deed language. I was under the impression, and I don't want to get too sidetracked on this because Sonia and Catherine and I can talk about it later, but I was under the impression that there was some language being developed with Jeff regarding his specific restrictions and refining them. And evidently there was a mix up there, so we need to deal with that, but and I have called Jeff the last 2 days to find out exactly when his 60 days is up, and he hasn't returned my
he's
call.
gone fishing probably in
Yeah.
the backlands and.
Whatever, he hasn't returned my call, I know it's coming. Because it was sometime in early July that he first called me, if I remember. So and Jim is working on that title research as well. And so that's where we stand.
yes.
Can we get copies of the survey or what we have for surveys? Because the surveys are definitely a key input,
Yeah,
for the grant
we have.
applications. And we will need, your last guest was talking about some appraisals and things like that. So that's another component that we will need to get.
Yeah, I should have added
we could have, the other option here was to get the Smith survey in particular completed. But it would have cost about $6,000 and couldn't get to it until probably sometime next winter. So that was, we rejected that option. But yeah, I have the Presser, I have a survey of Pressero's property before it was Pressero's. I have the survey, the town survey, which is right there. And I have a copy, Jim has it, of the partial survey that Beal did on the Smith property, but it's not, it says right on it, preliminary survey, so it's not a survey. Since he never signed off,
And on Klein,
Klein is nothing. I mean, we just have where he depicts on it.
Yeah,
There's no Klein survey. I did talk to the real estate person. They do not have one. But the Smith partial survey and the town survey are in sync on the Klein property.
so for Smith, for Klein, we just have a title of the plots for the plots, that's what's going to be done, transferred.
Yeah. Yeah,
And the lawyer's opinion.
right. Caveated with, but both Jim and the surveyor said that the deeds had really good calls in them, and there's quite a lot of detail, and they're pretty confident that, we're not buying 1 acre when they're claiming they have 120. Now, it might be 117 as opposed to 120, but or it might be 124. So,
Yeah, I've had some rather vague estimates on the size of my lot. Were any of the portions of the survey done, did they come up with any positive lines?
yeah, and there's documentation, and
Right.
right on, even on the town survey. There are some.
That's what you said, all
Right.
that was in agreement enough that the vague, when it got to be a bit vague way in the back end.
That's where Beal said it's a little vague, is what they call the head of the lot. Which
Yeah.
in the old days, the lots ran from 73
From
all
use-
the lots
from
to
useful to
131.
useless, yes.
And where they met was called the head of the lot. And that's if anything, that's the vaguest area.
Yeah, yeah,
But nothing, as the surveyor put it said to me, nothing that was like, whoa, that's not even close. So,
but when you get to the point. Perhaps you can answer this, as you get to the point, you're really following up on grants and pushing through on grants, did they want a positive survey?
That's why the language, I was trying to look at, and
they may.
they may, I think so, they.
Okay. But the estimate on that was 6 to 10 grand to
No,
figure out that back end?
six to survey the Smith property.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, and the other one is so tiny, so.
I don't know. about-
Well, you're gonna join them together probably anyways.
Right, but we didn't get that far. And
Well, no, it's,
when he said, I can't do it till the winter, I said, oh, so we got 3 options here. We either walk away from this. We do it now based on the best information we have, or we delay both of them. Try to raise 6 grand and get a survey 10 months from now and risk jeopardizing.
I'm wholeheartedly in agreement with your decision.
Well, because we already voted. I'm glad you-
Already at the board.
Right, roughing.
right, I think there's various things to talk about there. Doug Beck seems to say that if, for example, the Klein sale agreement papers said anything about the plan to put it into conservation, that would make it unusable for the encumbrance swap.
Well, that was not my understanding.
Well, that's what he said. Now, it all sounded bizarre, but that's what he said. So we just have to look into.
Could you repeat that?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
He said, first of all, he said it would be a good idea, which did make some sense to me, to remove the easement encumbrance on the tennis court, what he's calling the pocket park, which in the future may be in the way of doing something else with that land and the land around it. And it's kind of crazy to have an encumbrance on an acre and a half in the middle of everything else.
Mhm.
That part made sense. So then he says, what we have to do, because it was federal grant money that led to the easement, is we're gonna have to have a yellow book appraisal.
Yeah.
Both properties.
Right.
To determine whether it's a suitable value swap. Now, I'm pretty sure the 10 acres of Klein is going to be worth more than the 1.5 acres of tennis court, though. There could be
I
other
mean, we can
factors.
count on that.
No, because it's remote, it doesn't.
Yeah,
have to-
that's this is right out here, 873, I would count on that for 1 second.
Okay, so anyway, but what he said was, he said is, did you say anything? Are there any conditions on the purchase sale of the Klein property? And we said, no, that's a straight. Just sell it.
Right.
That's good, because if there was anything that said, we plan to buy it to put it into conservation. Then you couldn't do this swap. Now, I haven't researched why that would be so. It sounds nuts to me, but that's what he said.
I don't recall him saying that.
Yeah, I don't
Well,
either.
He's
But there are
right
no
there. I've
conditions
got
on
it,
it,
it's in the transcript, it's on
Yeah.
YouTube, so he did say that.
Well,
And it's a thing we need to look into,
Yeah.
but if the
Well,
Klein
we'll-
property doesn't make the most sense for a swap anyway, it's maybe not a problem.
well, we don't have to put any, there are no restrictions in the plan.
Right,
No, but
We did put in the purchase and sale agreement, that
Exactly.
Catherine, the language Catherine asked to be put
which
in there,
includes an intention to put it in
Right, but
conservation.
it's not, it's an intention.
Anyway. All of that, we just need to look into, see what we
Well,
want to do.
Yeah, but that's a problem. I mean, we should have, I guess I'm getting mixed messages, so.
Well, I think that the difficulty comes from the fact that, we had no clue about potentially switching the tennis court to some other location, and that's definitely, throwing
It's
everything.
not
into
moving it.
No, I don't.
no, it's the land, this side of it, right?
No, well, there was no discussion about moving the tennis.
Okay,
court.
but I
There was a
don't-
discussion about taking the federal encumbrance off the property on the other side of the driveway that runs from 73 over through the fire pond, through the little field to the back of the tennis courts. And swapping, take that encumbrance off, and the way to do that would be then to put under encumbrance equal or greater than value piece of
Yeah.
property out back, which couldn't even be the town property. It doesn't have to be either one of these, but
Right,
Equal or greater amenities.
equal or greater
value,
value.
Now, the property has to have equal or greater value. And the amenities you put on have to have.
Well, there won't be any amenities on there first.
And there's no amenities on this.
Well,
Right.
What, the tennis court?
No, the-
Yeah, they're talking about the land behind the tennis court.
The encumbrance, I thought, was on the tennis court.
The encumbrance is on
And
the land,
the
it's
land.
not on a court.
But the land includes the tennis court.
Yes, and it also includes a basketball court, and it
Yeah.
includes this part, the fire pond, and the property over here on the other side of the driveway. It's one piece.
But we do not have to duplicate the tennis court or the basketball court.
Right.
And that was clear in the discussion.
But why do we want to change that?
He said,
Because his point is that we. Actually, I'm not sure I agree with him, but if I recall, his point was that if we did that, that would make that property eligible. Well, first of all, we could get rid of the encumbrance up front here, which is in his mind in a bad spot.
And is of
Because of
possible
the-
future value.
Because of the value of the property.
Well,
To be
you know,
used.
so you want to.
What's the use of the encumbrance? Why is there an?
Has to be for
encumbrance?
recreation,
encumbrance,
because they put money down.
right.
It has to be for
Right.
recreation.
Right,
So our intention with all the property back here, most of the property back here, is to use it for recreation.
Right.
Which is why it's really, there is no harm in us transferring recreation for recreation.
Right,
right,
And so it does, because that's our intent to do with that property back there. And
yeah.
so,
let me,
and that was his-
read you what he said. Land and Water Conservation Fund will impose an easement requiring that the land be managed forever for public outdoor recreation. this easement can't be escaped. If the grantee sells the land, it must do a yellow book level appraisal, valuing the land as developable at the current value, and it will probably have appreciated considerably. Then the grantee must purchase land equal to or greater than the sold land in value and develop amenities on the purchased land equal to or greater than those on the sold land.
That's if we sell it. We're not talking about.
Yeah, we're not gonna sell.
We have asked them to.
No, but it's the land that you want to take the easement off of.
Yeah, I think he's talking about the vinyl. I didn't hear that, but if you
That's
say it's
what
on
I
the
said,
YouTube.
that
No, that's talking about if we were,
That's. if
in
we
that
sell.
discussion, his discussion was. We have an encumbrance and you can't get rid of it. And even if you sell it, to get rid of it, you have to do A, B, and C. That's not what we're talking about. So
No,
that
but
whole
you are-
discussion, no,
you are
all-
talking about getting rid of the encumbrance.
we are
moving the
talking
encumbrance.
about transferring the incumbents from one piece of property we own to another piece of
That's
property.
my
we own,
understanding.
Which is not selling it. If we sold it, we would have to do A, B, and C. To transfer the encumbrance, we don't have to do A, B, and C. Now, his whole discussion
Well,
was,
we have to check that because we weren't talking about
Yeah, I can check that,
transferring
but,
an encumbrance. We need to find out.
yeah, I can check that, but I've had several conversations.
I thought that's what the
Yeah.
conversation was about.
It doesn't, yeah, maybe he didn't say that, but he might have misspoke. I
At
don't
the
know.
beginning, he's talking about what a yellow book appraisal is,
Right.
and the
Yeah.
advantages, yada,
Yeah.
yada. And then later he talks about the downside. And then even later, we start talking about what about removing the encumbrance on the tennis court? I mean, that whole hour and a half discussion kept bouncing around from topic to
Oh, yeah.
topic, and
No
I,
question about
what
that.
I did in my summary was try to pull together
Yeah.
all the places where he talked about more or less the same topic.
All right, one more time, why are we trying to get rid of the encumbrance on that piece?
well, there's several things. One is, as long as the encumbrance
Well,
is
can
there.
I correct that? We're not trying. We had a discussion about.
And he is recommending.
Possibly doing.
And it's
was
his
his
recommendation. Now, the reason I think it is worth exploring is because right now, if we expanded this building, we would not be able to expand to that portion over there. We couldn't build.
We couldn't even put a septic system.
We couldn't even put a septic system. Okay, so it has, because of that encumbrance, we are now landlocked into the footprint we currently have. So that would give flexibility in the future to expand this footprint. The other part is that with that encumbrance comes not just an encumbrance, it comes a responsibility to maintain and maintain it for recreation.
Right.
So if we're gonna do anything, and it has tied up the improvements out here on it because of that encumbrance. So if you eliminate that encumbrance, now the things we do for the tennis court and for the basketball court and for the rest of this land out here no longer has to go through their hoops and
Right.
jumps and things, right? So.
We don't, and further than that, we don't, we get out from under the obligation to maintain the tennis and basketball court.
Correct.
Period. We can dig them up, throw them. away.
Right, which we can't do right now.
No, we can't do it right now. Right now, we're supposed to be maintaining them, and we're not doing a very good job at that at
Correct.
all. I mean, the basketball court's in pretty good shape now. So that was the other reason, is we get out from under that. The downside of it is, we're not eligible for 50% money to pay to maintain the court.
That's right.
Yeah,
From that source.
From that source, right? He suggested we could talk to like Maine Tennis Association, but
And his thinking was, if we are going to ask for money from him for the other properties back there, we will be creating a similar encumbrance back there. So why not just transfer this encumbrance to that if we're gonna end up in that,
Right.
in that position later?
So basically, the discussions about what we're doing with this piece of property, other than what you just said, have no bearing upon the land purchase.
Correct. Correct.
other than it might make us eligible for reimbursement,
Right,
even reaching back, because remember, he had us. That statement, Terry, that he had us submit, that we were considering.
Right.
Yeah, he actually asked for that statement, which is why I don't understand that seems
Well,
contrary.
he
Yeah.
repeatedly contradicted himself in the course
Yeah.
of the meeting, so that wouldn't be.
But remember, he emailed us and said, can you give a statement saying that you're gonna use it for, intend to use it for conservation purposes? And we sent that to him, you, right?
Yeah.
Can you pull up his email, Mary?
Maybe.
So that's why I was baffled when you started out with.
I can understand. No,
Well,
he said-
I might have it wrong.
No,
Now,
he said numerous
he,
things.
he
that
said it
could
would
well
be
right.
possible to mess it up if we put something in the deed language or in the purchase and sales agreement that said something to the effect of, you cannot do recreation on this property. And an example of that, very specifically, is to forbid hunting.
Mhm.
Because in every one of these grants that I've read
Yeah,
through,
team is together.
they all require you to allow hunting.
Throughout the entire piece or really or a portion?
Whatever you encumber.
Yeah, whatever you.
But so wherever your money goes,
Right,
they will
okay.
determine how much you need to
Right.
encumber with it.
Yeah.
So you can mess up
Yeah,
a future grant
Yeah.
from any of these sources if you put the wrong language into the deed.
but I had gone specifically to the grant paperwork to retrieve the little snippets,
Right.
use the right words,
We've
so.
got a couple of great bird dogs here looking for all of that. The hidden problem.
Well, the purchase and sale agreement with Klein includes the language
Yeah,
that you felt the land for the
Yeah.
future would require to get a grant there, and that's state money, it's a whole different
Yeah.
silo.
Right.
But it's very similar on the requirements.
Right.
The
Yeah.
requirements for grants from the different sources have similar types of language. There's tweaks, differences, but they're
See,
minor.
it's- even my understanding is land for the main future, so it's an umbrella. Grant, and then
Several.
they look at the proposal and then they decide which agency or department is best suited. So one could be conservation, the other one could be recreation, so we could end up being.
Or could it
any
be
of the
marine
sport,
research?
Well, no.
Well, but it could be, I
Yeah.
mean, you gotta have a state sponsoring agent
Yeah.
for land for main futures grants.
And they make the decision and we cannot
Yeah.
say anything about that, so, but. With the language that's in the kind, we are like covered for every possibility, so.
Yeah, so my whole fear on the language that we had been using for Smith,
Yeah,
Forever Wild.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the one we didn't want to.
Yeah,
add.
because it implied, and that's what I wanted to make sure Smith agreed that,
He hasn't, that I know. of.
yeah, that what I want to get from Smith is. No, that I had a concept in mind. I'm not talking about not cutting trees.
Not
And-
having.
Because several of them said you have to be able
I
to
have,
use.
I had conversation
forestry.
with them, they cut trees, things, when it was under his
Right,
family,
right.
we're exploiting it. What he doesn't want is a development, a housing development or
correct.
anything, but he
But-
wants hunting, he wants.
But what we need though, is someone needs to sit with him
Yes,
and we need to write, I think he has a vision of what he wants, but I don't think he's articulating it precisely.
Correct.
And that's what we need for
Yeah.
the.
and I think if
For the
we
deed.
show him what we have in
And
our,
Forever Wild is probably not the right term.
It
no,
is definitely not the right
Right.
term.
Probably
I had an
would be-
email conversation string with Annette Nagel and Jeff Smith. And asked Annette, what does Forever Wild mean? Is that what we want? She replied, no. And I gave the examples we were worried about, invasives,
Yeah,
et cetera. And she replied, basically Forever Wild has been a problem for various folks who put that restriction on because you cannot go in and deal with things like a plant disease, a
Forest fires.
flood, or whatever. So he got that information and he said, no, that's not what I want.
okay, well, that's new
Yeah,
information to
no.
me.
No, we know that from him.
Okay,
What we don't know is just, and we'll need some help from Annette. What do we want to say? What is the
well, if
magic?
we're gonna meet this 60 days, that's gonna happen quickly. See, I thought you guys were actually working on that.
Well,
I know, you were gone, but I mean,
I've been working.
and that, because Jim's strong, and that's the only thing he's waiting for. is
to
that.
me, the same
Yeah.
language could be put in both.
Well, that No, I don't think we want to put conditions.
There's a modestly.
No, that's fine, but you just have the condition to Smith
But
and
the
that's
language you. The
But that's not
John
condition.
shared. That you've now put on Klein. I responded to both of you earlier today, that's not tough enough to say
No,
what just
it's not
said.
conditions and it wasn't intended to be.
Got it, I was not in the picture, I thought we were talking about, I mean,
Yeah.
and even your. Subject line said Smith, so I thought we were talking about
Yeah,
Smith.
well,
Surprise, surprise, anyway, so. He wants something tougher than that. And. I
So-
think the language that I sent you is probably good enough, and I sent it to Annette. Hopefully she will respond, whether that's good enough
I
or
haven't seen
Smith.
that. But it came today.
yeah, this
No, no,
afternoon,
I sent,
this afternoon, you
she
sent a revised.
responded to what I sent to all.
Yeah, I saw her response.
That's the last.
Okay. All Jim Strong is looking for is 2 paragraphs to put in the deed.
Right.
Is what Smith wants and what we're willing to accept.
Right.
And so it seems that, and I just learned a second ago that Jeff is okay with taking forward as a lot. I didn't know that until 2 seconds ago. So I think
Mhm.
we're pretty much there.
Yeah.
I'll just write something up and I'll give it to you and you can give it to Annette. And then when you guys say it's okay, I'll give it a straw.
Well, and we'll run it by Jeff, right?
Well, obviously.
Okay.
But I think we need to be in agreement before we.
Well,
run
that's
by
what I
Jeff.
thought, and that's why I don't.
I don't wanna go back to Jeff 3 times,
No, right,
but
exactly.
I can't get Jeff to even call me.
Yeah, well, he's out of
Fishing.
position.
Well, I just want to say thank you for doing what you did with getting the land. I mean, you could choose to pick that up or not. Thank you for picking it up. Appreciate it.
I agree.
But, okay, so. But, you know, we as a board. And the town has, I'm jumping back now to 20,000 feet, we've never had a discussion about. Klein property, there's no conditions on that,
Right,
Yeah,
and
and
I'm
there
not,
were none presented to the town.
right, and if we're gonna impose, I'm not sure we, as a board, have the authority to impose those conditions on that Klein property.
Well,
I
I
don't
think
think
the
it
town meeting, the vote, I mean, it was presented. You know, with the
Yeah.
intention of having a converse, I mean, binding.
No, I think it was pretty clear that
The existing town land you have, you don't have the authority to.
No, I
Without
don't
putting
believe
it through a
so.
vote,
without putting it,
through a vote.
I don't
Okay.
believe so, I mean,
Yeah, I
that's
agree.
encumbering something forever.
Yes, no, I understand.
And if they gave us that authority, it'd be crazy.
but I don't, here's the other side.
Be fun though, you know.
I don't think putting the restriction in the deed is required for these grants. When we apply for the grants, they will write up the deed restrictions that they want to be applied to.
Right, but it is required for Jeff.
It is required for Jeff, because it's required for Jeff, not for, and we just want to make sure that what we put in there with Jeff doesn't
Mess you up.
mess up
Right.
the grant thing.
Right.
But if we're silent on clients, if there is nothing in the deeds restricting it. Then when we go for the grant and they say, you've got to put this restriction on, we say, okay, we will in the future.
Sounds right.
But I didn't, I,
Well, what I'm concerned about is we are doing the transaction before applying for the grant, and I mentioned before. They don't like that, you know, so, again, it's something we should check with Annette, you know, the more. Lining up with their requirement we do ahead of time, the better off, and I mean, Klein doesn't make sense in any case. If we're going to have restriction on Smith, it's obvious that Klein is gonna have the same thing. I mean, you know,
Well, I think the town did vote for the restrictions on the Smith property.
yeah,
yeah,
But if we're gonna put those same restrictions on Klein, we would have to, I would feel
I think
obligated
so
to go
too.
back.
Or if we're gonna put them on a portion of the town property.
Correct.
But I'll read you the article from Klein. It says, see what's on the town will authorize the select board to expend from undesignated fund balance. And from any grants and donations that may be available to purchase 2 parcels of land. Consisting of 11 acres more or less identified as tax map, blah, 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 blah. And is more particularly described in the deed, blah, 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 blah. And under other terms and conditions as the select board deems advisable. But to me, that doesn't give us the authority to encumber that land forever.
I would say only if it came up during the negotiation with Klein. Only if Klein was.
I wouldn't feel right about that. Now, Smith is very explicit about, because he's imposing conditions.
Right.
So I mean, I personally, I've never mentioned to Jim anything about putting conditions
Right.
in the Klein property. I thought we were just buying it.
Yeah.
I did include that
Mhm.
intent language.
Yeah.
About conservation, that was sort of inspirational, if you will, but it was nothing binding.
But you could just join a lot.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Yeah, maybe.
Given that Klein is embedded, I mean, yeah, I understand the legality of the thing, and then there is the practicality of it. And it's like, would you ever do anything else with Klein? You know, you can't sell it on its own. You know, if you're going to impose the conservation restriction on Smith, then,
Well, one of the reasons I was hot to get the Klein property as quickly as we did. Is because right next door to Klein are two solar
yeah.
groups that are literally pumping up against his
Yeah.
property
Yeah,
on two different corners.
yeah,
And so I, to say that it couldn't be or wouldn't be used for something else, I think is wrong. I think that property would be
No, it makes,
a gold mine for a solar. And there are several other groups that windmills, I mean, there's all kinds of things that
Yeah.
property could be used for. As opposed to conservation. I don't think it could be used for a house.
Yeah,
I don't
but
think
it-
it'd be used for
but you have two,
suburbs
you
or.
have two existing solar
subdivision.
farms that butt up against it. If they ever want to expand, we look for a
Correct.
place to like,
Correct.
take off any consideration of separating or losing that lot off the
Right.
table.
But I think that are we needlessly kicking around the Klein property? It seems to me that it's
it's done.
a done deal.
I agree.
And we're gonna buy the property, and if down the road, we wanna put it into conservation, which I think is the intent that we've had as a discussion. We need to go to town meeting and get them to do that.
Right.
So I don't know that we even need to kick around the Klein
Yeah.
discussion
But it's
anymore.
also
Yeah, I agree with
for the
you.
application. Because
I
if we
think we-
apply for a grant, the cycle is we're gonna have to have something in by the end of the year. Okay, and in it, we're going to have to put that intent. So again, it's like, we are going to apply for something and then I'll go back to town in June, once the award has.
No, we could call a special town meeting.
Okay, good, okay.
No,
okay.
and that's why we had that language, just said that's the intent, and that's the intent of these groups, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
Okay, because, you know, we can't apply for a grant for a specific purpose and then say, oops, the town doesn't want that, you know?
No, of course not, but as
well,
you
we could
say.
apply,
Well,
they'll come back and say, you gotta get this and this and that, so.
So if I could.
And that does happen all the time. In the state of Maine, that happens all the time.
Well,
If I could step into, try and look at it from the broader perspective for a minute. I think the meeting with Doug Beck, one thing it told us is a lot of what we do not want to do, certainly in the short run. We do not want to go for a grant from his outfit. We really are a much better fit for the acquisition and development of a nature preserve with land for Maine's future. So what we need to do is a lot of work on finding out exactly what hoops we need to jump through to apply for that.
Why don't we wanna go for a grant?
Because he's recreation, he's focused.
But that's a large part of what this purchase.
Down
was
the
about.
road, that's what we need to do, but right now, we need to acquire the land. We need to figure out what damage control we need to do in terms of ATV damage that's already on the land. Dealing with invasives. Maybe doing some forestry management, because right now, apparently, it's so choked with trees, you can't even walk through it. That's the priority right now. And down the road, in another grant cycle, we can think about going to the Land and Water Conservation Fund, the Recreational Trails Program, which come with all these federal strings and a requirement for really expensive surveys,
Mm.
which we don't need to do right now. And if
Well,
I'm,
I don't know
let me
that-
finish my thought. It
Well, you got
strikes-
so many thoughts going, I'm
I
gonna
know,
forget.
but it strikes me that when we do go for one of Doug Beck's grants, that we ought to be able, for example, if we're going to go for money for an accessible trail, we could encumber just the part that the accessible trail is going on and not, again, have all these hoops to jump through every time we want to try to do something with the whole 118 acres of Jeff Smith land. So there's just a lot to think about which way we've shown.
But remember, you can only reach back 2 years if you want to use the value between the
I got
purchase
it.
price and the appraised price
Right, so
as match, and match is tough to raise, and that's,
I understand,
okay.
but, and I haven't even
I mean,
had time to look,
Yeah.
to really research the land
that's-
future. Catherine knows more than I do.
And then, you know, and also, that also would allow us, if we're gonna delay that for 2 years, then we might as well apply for a grant to fix that tennis court. Why would we not at this point? You know what I'm saying?
Okay, we need a plan, and what I would suggest.
Well, that's why we're here to
Yeah,
talk
I
about
know,
it.
but just like, I wish we'd invited Annette, because she has done several cycles of this type of grants with Alfred and possibly with St. George. So I think she would have a lot of good information on, you know, how much time is needed to do what things, what is essential. You know, component, like if we need the appraisal to be a certain way, you know, who's gonna pay for that, you know, how much time is that going to take? And then, you know, what kind of planning, surveying of the land, you know, there is one thing to do the survey of the borders, but the survey of the inside, what do we have inside? You know, that's more the environmental side. And again, who can do that? How much does it cost and so forth? We need a budget and then figure out where are the sources of that money? Where can we tap to pay for each component? But there is definitely a time pressure on all this, you know, we want, I mean, at the minimum, a certain land for a future would help pay for the land, you know, at the beginning, and then you can go back for another cycle to develop it and build trails or do whatever other things we want to do recreation wise. So,
If you have halfway down the first page of the outline, is we need to meet with Annette. We need a meeting with Annette, hopefully when we're as informed as we can be before, so we have intelligent questions to ask. Similar to the meeting with Doug Beck. We also, and it doesn't maybe have to be as quick, but he mentioned that they've done a long project with Owl's Head, and they are doing a project with St. George. And we need to ask those folks, how's it going? How
Well,
do
they're
they-
doing a project with us.
Pardon?
They're doing a project with us. Right now, we're just gonna close it out.
But both of those other projects are for a trail and a nature preserve. A much closer to what we want to do with this land than a tennis court.
Well,
So, but I really, first thing is, I bet Annette could give us an enormous amount of information that we need to proceed.
Overall, once you've got the paragraphs that you need to plug into the deed for the Smith property, pretty much the town's responsibility as far as purchasing the property is moving along is pretty much done.
yeah, I
Right.
think with the exception of the commitment we made to Prethera.
Right, okay, which was the road thing.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so it ends up, what we're finding out now, there's a lot of, it's not that we don't know, but just look, this list here is really great.
yeah,
It shows what the
work to do.
in a sense, the Conservation Commission is gonna try to answer as many of these questions as possible. And what I found valuable tonight is understanding that we've got to be really careful about what we say here because it could scotch something later on. And that's the thing that we're really looking for. But this particular outline is pretty much exactly what has to happen. Right? The time restraint of 2 years, in the sense of there's a fund of money that's available if we can do this within 2 years. it's gonna sway us one way or the other, I think, on how we decide to go about and do this, but I do think as the Conservation Commission, it's picking up the ball and finding out how to go about doing this, so. If we continue to do that it's not for you all, it's our job. But,
And those are exactly my thoughts.
Yeah.
So you've articulated exactly
Okay.
what I've been waiting to say. I agree 100%.
Yeah.
And our hope is that those very questions and the plan and the process that goes ahead is what you come back to us. And all we want to make sure is that we don't we don't get too far ahead of it, that we do something that we're not allowed to do,
Yeah.
or that messes up opportunities for it. And when I say not allowed, there are some things we have to take back to the town. There are some things you're gonna have to come back to us to get approval for. But my personal opinion, we have voted or turned this over to you officially, but that's exactly what I'm hoping that you guys will take the ball and run with and provide the plan and flesh out all those details.
Well, I assume that as well, but I also know we made a commitment to the town to try to recoup some money to help offset the money that we spent for the purchase.
Right.
And if we're not gonna go after the Land and Water Conservation Fund for a couple of years, which I'm fine with, although we do have the issue with the Presero issue. Then we might as well apply for the grant to fix the tennis court. I don't wanna wait 2 years, forego that, and then not do this. I mean,
Right.
people have already donated to that, and it's gonna take 2 years to do that, so, but I'm fine with that, but it's, and we could always unencumber it later.
So. The 2 years is, you have to have an application in by 2 years? I mean, obviously. we can't
From the
do all the
date of
work.
your application can include purchases made
Okay,
up to 2 years prior to your date of.
so we just have to have an application in. By 2 years.
But LMF,
Element.
yeah, I'm
Well,
not sure, I'm
maybe
not
we
sure
don't
about,
do that.
I'm not sure about the other one, it was 2 years, but I don't have the precise, whether it was an application or not. But if we're not gonna do the other one, if we're gonna forego the Land and Water Conservation Fund and do that for recreation and trailer down the road,
Yeah.
then that's not an issue.
Right.
We're just gonna have to find a match elsewhere,
If,
because you can't reach back more than 2 years, and if that's the case, then we might as well go ahead with the tennis court.
it's possible that we could, within 2 years. Do an application to LNF and an application to Land and Water.
Not if you do the tennis court, because you can't have two going.
No,
on.
No, that's what I think you're saying. Don't
If.
Don't
you
not
do
unencumber.
tennis,
Yeah.
It is an option. You guys will have to decide which way you want to go, but it is an
Right.
option.
But the original intent was out back, as soon as we close this account out, which we're literally working on right now, like today,
Mhm.
literally. We were gonna apply for a second grant out here to get it going as quickly as possible, and I personally don't wanna delay it 2 days. Because it takes them so long to.
Well, that's the other problem with Land and Water. As you said, they're so short-staffed that it takes.
But my point is, if we're not even thinking about accessing them for payback, we're only thinking about accessing Land and Water for trail construction or something down the road, then 2 years, 3 years from now, then fine,
These are, yes, I see them as separate. at this
Right.
time.
then that's
And
fine,
if-
if
and
we can
if-
stick with the original plan.
Land for Maine's future. Would count. The purchase price or the value
Yes,
which is greater than the purchase price.
Yeah.
Or match,
Yep, that'd be fine,
then we've used it.
yeah, you can't use it twice.
I do not recommend this.
You
So,
can try.
right. And I would think,
you see,
one question I have, Catherine, I assume. We could use some of the Land for Maine's future grant to deal with the Prothero Road issue. That's a thing we could do.
Well, let's talk about that.
But I mean, because that's another thing that's.
But the erosion
that's
issue,
time pressure.
as I understand it from Preston, I walked out there, son, the erosion issue is actually much worse on the town property than it is on the Smith property. So I don't believe you
I'm not
can,
talking about erosion, I'm talking about, we told Prothero that we would create,
oh, I thought you said erosion.
no, I said Prothero, I'm sorry.
Proper, sorry, okay.
So, no. We,
But there-
that's another time pressure that we've agreed to.
Right, but I don't think that
If we
road
could
is,
use- Let me just finish the thought, so if LMF money can be used to support whatever we need to do to bypass Prothero's Road and close down that, then that takes care of the
But-
time
Okay,
pressure on that.
I want to
but
interject
can you
something.
use the LMF money on the town property?
What's the kind of question?
That on the plan, you know, it's like, to me, a big argument for them giving us money for the purchase is that it's going to be combined with a big portion of the town land and therefore constitute a unique
Right,
forested area. So definitely the town land becomes part of it. But,
well, some of them.
yeah, yes.
Yeah, the back part, if you could. And maybe we need a special town meeting for that, but if we say we want to take. To put the back part of the town line into conservation. And include it with the Smith and Klein property in the plan. Then presumably we could use the LMF grant to work on things like. The replacement road. That's all something we need to check, but it seems a way we could go.
Except the worst of the erosion is right, or
Yeah.
very close. The worst erosion is where, in my mind, where we wouldn't want to encumber the town
No, I'm not saying erosion, I'm saying
land. No, I am saying, yeah.
replacing.
Well,
We
I
have,
just wanna,
we
have.
told Petro that we would. Take away the right of way
Right,
when we have a separate road.
right, but we already got a road that goes all the way out there. It's just in such terrible shape. It's all dug up with ATVs and stuff. It's not as good as Smith Road than the Stump Dump Road, but it's there. It's cut through the woods.
Yeah.
No.
It's just dug up.
Okay,
Right, so the question is. If,
so that 2-year time period is an issue.
lost you.
We would take away our right to cross his property. When we have an alternative route,
Right.
Or
which
2
we
years.
have, or 2 years, which we have. That's what he just
Even though-
said. Well, you may have to use a Jeep to do you.
yeah, it doesn't matter whether it's a mess or not, I don't think it matters whether it's a mess.
Yes,
We have
I
it,
agree 100%.
She's saying there's possibility of trying to get some grant money to help you all out with that problem, but basically that road issue is a selectmen's problem, not a conservation problem.
I would like to mention something about the Crossing Road, maybe a detail and irrelevant, but I want to get it out. It's like, I think he doesn't want vehicles crossing his property, but I don't want us to close ourselves from walking on his property.
Oh, no, he wants
He
walking.
wants me to.
Yes.
He wants. to.
Walking, that goes that length, okay?
Okay, you're saying different things, so. What?
No,
No, we're all saying the same.
He does not, because his fear is that right now, Smith has a right of way and Smith has a right of way. If the town owns it, it's gonna become a public right of way.
Right.
Everybody has access.
Right.
Every,
I mean, last time I spoke with Mr. Prothero, his biggest objection was to the ATVs.
Right.
So it
Not
was to
just
the,
the ATVs, he also talked about. Right now, the only people there are people that already go through it, but they're not doing it legally, they don't have, and he has not posted that property.
yeah,
So to say that they're not doing it legally is kind of a misnomer,
Right.
but right now. There's only one person who has the legal right to access his land, one person. When we take that over, the whole town now has
Actually,
the
the whole-
legal
right,
right.
state. Oh,
Yeah, that's
country.
right. It has the legal right to cross his land, and that's what he doesn't want. He does not want He doesn't want everybody marching through there and doing whatever in the woods they're gonna be doing, camping and building fires and just walking from one site to the other.
But, okay.
I thought he was very clear on that.
I just wanted-
He doesn't want a million people.
We're talking a
But
very,
to me, I mean, I understand that, but again, it's not practical. How is it going to prevent that? There is no way.
Well, no, there is a way.
When
Oh,
he
yeah,
puts
gated
a
fences.
gate and he posts the land,
And he posts it. As soon as you post it, now there's no hunters and technically you can't, if you walk on it, you are trespassing. So.
right,
He has signs actually along the,
but if I can just call your attention to this, you know, we're talking. A relatively short distance, this road V's right here, just before his boundary, it comes this way, and this is where it really eroded badly. And this board lot is very low and wet,
can you,
Can you put up gates and bars?
so we're only talking.
Traffic goes.
Yeah.
Getting from really here back out to this woods road. And I think there is a couple of cross sections there, there's definitely one that goes this way, now it's in terrible shape,
yeah,
but. Everybody see?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So. Hmm.
So there, I mean, there's two things. One is currently. The access to our newfound property out there, this whole area that we're going to develop things in for recreation. Those will need to be developed for recreation trails. And so to do that, you're gonna have to get vehicles back there to develop those trails. And you're gonna need to move people in and sawdust in and wood planks and whatever you're gonna bring back to do that process. And so if we can do that, we can do that right now on his property.
Mhm.
Once we purchase it, we can do it right through there.
Who's his?
Pretros.
Okay.
I know, but we have what we are purchasing is a right of way through his land.
Right.
So we now have the legal ability to do that. And we told him we will relinquish our right of way, our right to that property, even though we are buying it by buying the Smith property.
And that was in the article, the town meeting article,
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah, well,
That we would give that up. Once we have built
Yeah,
our access. So initially, we need access to build it out. But then we're gonna need a way for people to get from here
yeah, it's gonna have to be,
to our walking trails.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so the question is, are we gonna do that within 2 years? And I don't think so. I don't think that's gonna happen. I don't even think we're gonna be finishing up the access to it. So we're going to have to do something within the next 2 years to give us an alternate route.
Which was my other questions, because right now the only public access is through that gate. Because the other end of the stump dome, same thing, it's not public way, it's just people also, letting a few people go through, but again, if a horde of people were to come through, they would say, no, you can't do that, this is my property. So,
I don't understand.
the other end of the stump down trail that gets out on Grierson.
Oh, the banner line, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so that's not public.
no,
No, so the only access, to the recreational park, how many acres we want it to be, it's just going to be through the gates here.
right, and we also got an issue with the transfer station. Because that's supposed to be shut, not open to the public unless there's an attendant there. Now, people walk out there, I realize.
Well, the
Don't work with
gates-
Trump stuff.
Huh? Well, you can't move the gate unless you build a big gate along, it's something we're gonna have to deal with. Because if you look at the transfer station, there's a long area there where it's abuts that road.
Right.
And, so. We're gonna have to somehow deal with that. Now, maybe, I don't know if that involves, down the road building a fence, but, but there's nothing saying that we have to provide public vehicle access.
No, that's what-
We could say you could park here and walk.
Yeah, I mean, that was my intention.
But even then, I think, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking if you, right now, it's just sort of, we have uninvited guests that walk out there and use it. If we're actually inviting people, I can see DEP saying, No, you can't invite people to walk out the road that goes to your transfer station unless that transfer station is fenced off.
Right.
You're calling it stopped off a transfer station, because I'm not really understanding what.
Well, the
Yeah, he is talking about the stump dump.
It is a transfer station.
Yeah.
I mean, if you take things and transfer it. But
it's not
it doesn't take stumps.
I know.
That's right.
All right, so.
So that's another little wrinkle that will need to be dealt with. Or, you know.
But I agree with you. I think it's-
No, none of our issue. I'm just raising these issues, right? They're not possible. So are we,
I think, yeah. So you're done with Klein, then there
well,
is,
we're not.
yeah,
completely,
but
actually,
Almost.
Just about.
just about, then there is the issue of contacting Jeff to make sure he approves the final language.
Get the call you back.
And then, so that same thing, that transaction can go through. And then essentially is us getting to work in, developing a plan and a proposal and putting that in and requiring the town to authorize whatever needs to be authorized and,
Yeah, but I also think we need to, I mean, if we're talking about using that existing road. I mean, there were erosion puddles up there.
oh, yeah.
That, I mean, yeah, okay, so I mean, yeah, so. It's not even walkable
Do you
at
know
times.
what caused the erosion?
Yeah, the ATVs,
It
yeah,
is, yeah.
yeah.
So. the
And then we
first
got,
thing to
so
do would
that's
be
where I'm going.
Bar in
Just
there.
if you could let me finish, that's where I'm
Okay.
going. I think we need to consider banning ATVs on the town property, and that's gonna be a struggle.
Yeah, I know.
Well, a lot of people will agree, with
Down
you.
a little.
The ones that don't.
Right.
And I'm afraid it's gonna lead to damage at the salt shed and. I can see it coming.
Don't know your town.
So you're talking about intentional vandalism.
Yes.
In retaliation for
Yeah.
not letting them rip
Yeah.
up your road.
Well, they've been having fun out there for years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but there's no sense in fixing that trail
Yeah.
unless we really wanna fix it with really heavy rock or something, I mean, which is gonna get expensive, big.
Yeah, but that will be a magnet.
Well,
The
Yeah.
forest's recommendation would actually to do trails that would weave around the main road to give a chance to the main road to get back to something practical.
Yeah, but we remember we got it 2 years to get to
Yeah.
that crest level. We're talking that little short distance.
Yeah,
Yeah, so for a lot of reasons, 2 years is a thumbtack out there that we need to.
yeah, so we need to get going.
But yeah, I think we probably need to do something specific about the ATVs.
well, if you put money into fixing that road, the town sees how much money it costs to fix that section of road. Regrade it and stuff like that, and you let ATVs on it for a year and you have to do it again the next year, it'll be a lot easier to pass the ban.
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't think it's a simple matter of rating it, I mean, it needs.
Feeling.
It needs basement area.
Yeah, no.
It's just clay,
It's not gonna be cheap,
Yeah.
yeah.
but when we say a road, I don't think it has to be more than. That wide,
Yeah.
does it? Or maybe I mean, it would be nice to be able to get an ATV, an ATV rescue vehicle.
Right.
Yeah.
If someone broke their.
Yeah, I just check with the rescue people and see what you'd want for clearance.
Yeah, but,
Thank you all.
so do we have a plan?
Yes.
I think so.
So I'm gonna apply for that tennis grant then, as soon as we close this out, right?
Well, I talked to him and see.
Well, I will talk to him,
Yeah,
but if we're not gonna, I mean, I don't wanna not do that if we're gonna wait 2 years to.
right.
Well, I think is that the conservation is involved in town parks and stuff. I look at doing the tennis courts sooner than later. It provides a benefit to the town a lot sooner than anything. we're doing
Yes.
back.
Yeah, and it's getting a lot of pickleball play, I mean, look at how many guys you had the other day? And there's
What?
2,
Nine.
and it's 2 days a week,
Yeah.
And
I
there's
mean,
other
if you
people out
really
there,
manage
I mean,
to-
it's really
to fix
taken
that
off.
court, immediately.
it's busy out there, I've seen a lot of people out there, and,
Yeah.
you know.
So, but the question is, are we gonna be able to get a contractor out there?
Well, I think we are, if we tear it up,
Yeah,
you know, it's gonna take time though. But I'm also looking at another option, that it may be a hybrid, but I'll talk to you guys about it at some other point. I was hoping to have the money, I wouldn't have it. Cause I didn't think we were gonna have the grant money available. When I walked in here tonight.
Bring that. Set a date.
So-
That's
are you
Okay.
good, are you good with us?
That's,
You have,
Monday. Could we try to make a date to meet with Annette?
I'm thinking that you guys. need
yeah.
to-
Yeah, you got it.
No,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
It could be quicker.
but I have another question. Are we gonna try to solicit local donations to help offset? I feel like we promised the town
We would raise money.
that we would
yes.
raise, or try to raise, not raise, but try to raise some money to offset the purchase cost.
Yes,
And I know talking about the LMF, but do we wanna do some local appeal?
yes, I mean, that was part of.
But I mean, if it gets too stale, I mean, you can't
But
be,
again, it's like we need to have something to present. It's like, this is what we intend to do. This is what we solicit.
you're right, but I don't, you can't raise, in my mind, no one's gonna donate to something we paid for 2 years ago.
except for some.
But no, that can start now, the public fundraising.
Well, that's what I'm wondering, should we just be informal about that, and at least if we sent out something on the email list or something, at least the townspeople would say, well, at least they're trying.
Well,
Why not do like a GoFundMe?
well, it really quickly occurs to me, if we had some pictures of the damage to the section of road that we need to fix up in order to meet Plethero's requirements and stuff like that, and saying, and instead of buying a brick and a sidewalk, is buy a half load of gravel.
Yeah.
Right.
And the few-
That's not,
Put your name
but that's not raising money to help offset the purchase price, which is what we sort of promised we would do.
Oh, okay, yeah, all right, I get
But
that.
again, so give us a chance to think and prepare something for that.
Yeah.
But I think what we said was that we will seek grants to help offset the purchase. price.
I believe it's in donations. And
And, yeah,
And donations, that's,
both, yeah, both.
it did.
okay, you're right.
And I think at a minimum, we need just to put the Senate, just at a bare minimum, have Terry send something out on the list there saying, we've closed on these properties.
Yeah.
If you would
so-
like to donate to help offset, it would be very much appreciated.
So as you
at
say,
least
after
people-
you close. we can get
Right,
both.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
And then at least people would say, well, at least they tried.
They said
Yeah.
they did it.
So I agree, and I think between now and closing, you guys could come up
yes,
with some.
yeah, with a wording or something.
Grants.
An appeal.
Or donations.
Back to the road, I think that if we got some pictures of the damage, we could even get a news story about the damage these things cause to places like that. And combine that with some shame and maybe some.
You gonna
ask.
put your name on it?
I could, I mean, I'd like to set a tank trap out in my crossing, because as bad as you can find photographs there, I can bring you ones that are just as bad.
Me too.
I think as we ask for money, we do need to be saying, please don't think that the purchase price is the end of what we need to spend. You know, there's a lot of,
Yeah, but.
there's a lot.
Don't
of
stay close.
Yeah.
I'd be careful, but.
All right,
Yeah.
We can work on the language, but we need not to be in a
This
position.
is the deal, Isabel.
We need not to be in the position of having them say, well, you asked me for money and I gave you money and I'm done. We need to say,
You're never done.
well, we need to say, here's some of the stuff we are gonna need to do, and we are seeking grants. And we're certainly hoping we get them to help us with a lot of it, but it's not gonna cover it all, and that's why we are asking for your donation.
Sounds like we have a volunteer. Right?
What strikes me is that any money that we do raise with an appeal, you're matching funds later on. keep a list of what you raise. Yeah, it'd be nice to be able to tie it with an existing matching funding, so your 50 was actually give the town 100, you know. Yeah,
Lost you, but you can explain
yeah,
later.
we'll get all that.
Okay.
Okay, so do you guys need anything else from us?
No.
Okay,
No.
good. Do you have anything else, John?
No, I'll just write up that little blurb for inclusion in the deed and circulate it to you guys and some hopefully get it to Jeff. If he
Excellent.
ever returns from the wild.
Perfect.
And I don't know when the 60 days is, but
Well,
it's coming fast.
Yeah.
Those who have to come back.
I know. They used to want to put the deadline.
Then without objection, the select board is adjourned. You guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
do
Thank
think.
Yeah, I think it's,
I think-
going by where we were standing.
Yeah, so I don't think we need to talk. We were gonna talk a little bit after the meeting about this. I think we covered it.
Yeah.
Plans.
Okay.
No, but
Yeah,
we got a plan.
Right, we don't have language. So to continue with. On the agenda. We did it.
Yeah, I can borrow your copy of the agenda again.
No,
I got one right here.
oh, wait, wait,
We're good.
you gotta do right here. Got it. All right. So,
Well, I'd like to say something, I'm gonna give it in minute right now, Coach. Well, I want to thank him for his chairmanship and conducting the meetings in a timely fashion. And hope it continues in that way.
Hi.
yeah, we never go get it.
Everyone's been doing a great job.
Hey, we're all still here.
All right.
Well, the important part of the job, I think, is conduct it.
So, yeah,
So we are up to review and approval of meeting minutes for July.
right.
Make a motion to
I
approve the
think you,
meeting.
yeah. Is there another, we don't have another plan anymore in the July meeting, so I can't make this motion to.
Make a motion to approve the.
Right, I was not there.
Begin.
Yeah.
No, we don't have a quorum.
What it is, that's what it is, so we can never,
We three cannot
seeing it.
approve.
and it's just.
We were
three of
not
us.
here.
Okay.
And that was-
Oh, we just put off, yeah, just.
No, what do we do?
Well, it was a minute, it was a meeting where nothing was done anyway. so-
Yeah.
Are we on the minutes? I was
Yeah.
signatory for minutes.
Yeah, we're trying to,
I took the minutes.
And
And
all you need is three, correct? Or do you?
no, we need four.
Four, okay. And
And we
so,
don't have,
okay. Don't, we don't want.
we'll never have because we have a vacancy.
I would accept the motion.
You've got
Or
six,
accept the
You know,
fact.
On a
members.
technicality,
Yes, come on, it's like, let's not spend 2 hours on it.
let's, you guys, the three of you who were here, go ahead and approve.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve.
I have-
Seconded.
No,
You can say.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're doing it all over again.
Right.
Oh, okay.
only those.
We all approve, we're done with this.
Okay.
Done. Okay. I am not inclined to take up anything else on the agenda.
Just review the form and be done, you know,
Yeah, that,
What form?
the,
That's.
the submission,
yeah.
That's, where is it?
Can you read it
I'll
aloud?
put it, yeah, I'll put it onto the next agenda, next month.
okay.
Yeah.
It's very
All
nice.
right, well-
It's gonna be talked at him.
Okay.
The chairman said that they didn't want to take up anything else on the agenda. I make a motion to adjourn.
We don't need to move to adjourn.
Okay, all right.
I can adjourn without objection, if everybody's content with leaving.
We're in agreement.
Without objection.
Right. All right.
Thank you.
I just want to thank you.
Put that on the record.
So at the beginning, I think we should.
But I mean, really, that's just because I think that Tom gets this afternoon, right?
That's
What I mean, it's such a thorough job. Like, some goes through
Yeah.
it.
Is it a copy?
Yeah.
Email or has it your review and whatever's you.
I almost feel like it was a meeting.
Yeah, maybe between that and tonight, I learned a lot. Everybody know that.
So.
All right, so we meet next month in September.
Are we sitting, turn off live the other day?
I have no idea how to do that.
Terry.
I can do that.
Yeah, we can.
Idea, we're gonna switch off.
Well, that's right.
So,
Yeah.